All right, let's talk about World War I. You know, it's often called the Great War, and for good reason. It was this absolutely catastrophic chain reaction that just pulled the entire globe into its first truly modern industrial-scale war. And the crazy part? It all started with a single gunshot. We're going to unpack how that one event could literally redraw the entire map of the world.
So this is the big question, isn't it? The one that's just mind-boggling when you think about it. How did a couple of gunshots in a city most people hadn't even heard of, how did that lead to the deaths of more than 10 million soldiers? I mean, an entire generation just wiped out. It seems impossible. So let's dig in and figure it out.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, the very first domino. It wasn't some huge battle, nope. It was a single spark on a city street that was about to set the whole world on fire.
The date is June 28th, 1914. The place, Sarajevo. And our main character, if you will, is Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Now this guy is a big deal. He's the heir, the next in line to rule the entire sprawling Austro-Hungarian Empire. He and his wife, Sophie, are just making a royal visit, riding through the capital of Bosnia, which had only recently been taken over by the empire.
And the person who pulls the trigger? A young man named Gavrilo Princip. He was a Bosnian Serb, part of this secret nationalist group with a pretty intense name, the Black Hand. And their whole goal, their mission, was to unite all Slavic people, and they weren't afraid to use violence to do it. So, you gotta understand, for Austria-Hungary, this wasn't just some random murder. No way. They saw it as a direct attack, basically sponsored by their neighbor, Serbia.
But here's the thing, right? An assassination, even of a royal, doesn't just automatically cause a world war. The truth is, that spark landed in what was basically a giant powder keg. Europe in 1914 was just waiting for a reason to explode, full of these tangled alliances, super intense nationalism, and everyone building up their armies.
So, picture this. Europe was divided into two big teams. On one side, you had the Triple Entente. That's France, Britain, and Russia. They were basically all buddies because they were kind of nervous about how powerful Germany was getting. And on the other side, the Central Powers, which was mainly Germany and that Austro-Hungarian Empire we just talked about. And these weren't just handshakes and friendly promises. Oh no. These were serious military alliances. The rule was simple. If you attack one of us, you've attacked all of us.
And bubbling just under the surface of all this was this really powerful idea called pan-Slavism. The basic gist was that all Slavic people should be united. Russia, being the biggest Slavic country by far, saw itself as the big brother, the protector of all the smaller Slavic groups, especially the Serbs. Well, you can see the problem, right? This put Russia on a direct collision course with Austria-Hungary, which was this huge empire desperately trying to hold on to its own Slavic populations, like the ones in Bosnia where the Archduke was shot.
So, with tensions already at a breaking point, everything just goes into overdrive in July 1914. This is where a few really bad decisions, some blunders, and some super aggressive moves basically push all of Europe right off a cliff.
And here it is, the moment the crisis really catches fire. Germany gives Austria-Hungary something historians call the blank check. Imagine giving your friend a signed blank check and saying, "Go spend whatever you want, I've got your back." That's what Germany did. They gave them an unconditional promise of military support no matter what they did to Serbia. So of course, Austria-Hungary feels bold. They send Serbia this list of demands, an ultimatum so ridiculous, so harsh that they knew it would be rejected. They were basically looking for a fight.
And then it all happened so fast. It was just one domino after another. July 28th, boom, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia. So what happens next? Russia, the big Slavic protector, starts getting its army ready. Germany sees that as a threat, so on August 1st, boom, Germany declares war on Russia. 2 days later, boom, Germany declares war on France, who's Russia's ally. I mean, just like that, in less than a week, all the major powers in Europe were officially at war.
Now, Germany's big plan for winning the war quickly, it was called the Schlieffen Plan, had one major snag. It required them to march right through Belgium to get to France. The problem? Belgium was neutral. There was an international treaty saying so. And invading a neutral country, well, that was a huge deal. That was the final straw for Britain. On August 4th, they declared war on Germany. And just like that, what was a European fight became a global war. And the war that followed, well, nobody had ever seen anything like it. This wasn't knights on horseback. This was a global, industrial-scale conflict with a level of death and destruction that was just completely unimaginable.
Just look at that number. 10 million. 10 million soldiers killed. And that doesn't even count the tens of millions more who were wounded or just vanished. It's a number so big it's almost meaningless, you know? It's hard to wrap your head around that scale of loss. We're not just talking about a war, we're talking about an entire generation of young men just gone.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures what life was like for the guys on the front lines. The war on the Western Front got bogged down in this brutal trench warfare, so life for a soldier became this horrible cycle, just endless, miserable boredom, sitting in muddy, disease-filled trenches, and then moments of pure terror. Whistles would blow, and you'd have to climb out and run across no man's land into machine gun fire. It was just awful.
You have to remember, this was the world's first big industrial war. And that meant new, horrifying ways to kill people. The machine gun, massive artillery shells, poison gas that choked you to death, submarines, these U-boats that could sink ships without warning. It all made defending a position way easier than attacking one, which is why the death tolls were just so astronomically high.
So for years, the war was just this bloody, grinding stalemate. Neither side could get an advantage. But then, in 1917, a real game changer happened. The United States finally got into the fight. After Germany kept sinking American ships with their U-boats, the U.S. had had enough. It dropped its neutrality and joined the Allies. And the arrival of all those fresh American soldiers and America's industrial power, well, that was what finally tipped the scales. The fighting finally stopped on November 11th, 1918. But the end of the war, well, that was really just the beginning of a whole new chapter, and in a lot of ways, a much more complicated one.
So the winners all get together in Paris to figure out the peace terms, and the result is the famous Treaty of Versailles. It officially ended the war, sure, but the conditions it forced on Germany were incredibly harsh, and as we'll see, they would cause huge problems down the road.
Probably the most controversial part of the whole treaty was this one little article, Article 231. It was called the War Guilt Clause, and it literally forced Germany to accept 100% of the blame for starting the war. This was then used to justify making them pay crippling amounts of money, called reparations. You can just imagine the anger and resentment this created inside Germany. It was profound. So the war didn't just end the fighting, it absolutely shattered the old world order. 4 giant empires, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, and the Ottoman, they were just gone. Poof, vanished. And in their place, you have this completely new map of Europe and the Middle East, and rising from all that destruction was this one big, hopeful idea. The League of Nations. It was this attempt, a really noble one, to make sure a war like this could never, ever happen again. And that brings us to the really chilling final question. They called it the war to end all wars. But when you look at the harsh treaty, the economic ruin, all that anger simmering in Germany, you have to wonder, did this war actually achieve peace? Or did it just light the fuse for an even bigger, even more devastating explosion just 20 years later?